Welcome everyone. Today I wanted to do a video comparing the stock market and cryptocurrencies. In particular, I wanted to compare Apple, the stock, versus Cardano or ADA, the cryptocurrency. And I wanted to use a basic statistics tool to determine whether or not ADA in the future can reach a sort of price stability. We see in cryptocurrency that the prices fluctuate quite often and the ranges are wild. ADA climbed over $1 and now it is sitting at 3-4 cents. It's really a meteoric rise and a meteoric decline. So I tried to draw parallels between the stock market and cryptocurrency because history has a tendency to repeat itself. It repeats itself so well that you can create patterns. You can find statistics, and you can aggregate data in a way that makes sense. So while the minutia doesn't make sense, the day-to-day price fluctuations, in the grand scheme of things, everything follows a pattern. Human beings are very predictable creatures in aggregate, and you're able to predict patterns and you're able to predict certain ratios that allow you to understand correlations for stocks, correlations for cryptocurrencies and whatnot. The best traders, the best investors pick up on those patterns. Some of them are more fabricated than others, but the long-term hodlers, the people that can see the big picture, they tend to be the ones that triumph in the end. So on the left-hand side, we have Apple, the stock, and on the right-hand side, we have Cardano. And each of the cells represents the price, the closing day price at one particular day in time. So I took all the data for Cardano or ADA for the past 2+ years on CoinMarketCap, the closing price. So if you go to CoinMarketCap, you can click on more information and you can figure out what ADA closed at each day. And this gives you an aggregate of what is going on a day-to-day basis. So there are probably, 700 plus points there. And on the left-hand side, we have the aggregate data of Apple. So the daily close of each day, all the way ranging back from 1980. So this is when the first stock was first IPOing. The daily close started at around 40 cents. And we know that Apple now is well over $200 a share. So it really had a meteoric rise. And you always think, can these kind of things happen to ADA? I don't think it's going to happen like that. But ADA can have a meteoric rise. If you look at the data points for Apple, you actually see that it started at 40 cents and it was quite volatile, going up to $1, catapulting back down to like 20 cents. The percentage losses were incredible, just like ADA was. Now, at some point, the pattern of complete decline turned around for Apple, and it started to moon. And the reason why is because long-lasting companies tend to find an equilibrium. If the company cannot find an equilibrium after years, chances are that the company will die. And I don't know what the time frame is, but this can be best described by a word called kurtosis. And kurtosis, it's a statistics term, and kurtosis is the measure of probability distribution in random variables. What does that mean? So if you're familiar with a bell curve, you have outliers on both the right and the left-hand side, and it sort of forms a bell-shaped pattern where the mean kind of creates this arch. So you can accurately, or as accurately as you can describe the patterns of certain statistics or certain numbers. If you have a class, let's take a class for example. You have 10 kids in the class. There are going to be a few kids that score 100% on the test. There will be a few kids that fail the test, and everyone will be centered in the mean. They'll probably have a 70% or 80%. So it forms this distribution. So each side of the tail, you're going to have different people that either excel very much or do very poorly. That's exactly what it is for everything. If you take a sport, it's the exact same thing. You take the NBA or you take the NFL, there are only a few teams that make the playoffs. A majority of teams are just average. They just miss the playoffs, but the excelling teams, they're on that right side of the tail, and they're outliers. And then the terrible teams, let's say the Dolphins or the Falcons, they're on the left-hand side. Same for soccer, same for every single sport. You have the excellers, you have the people that are just not doing well, and everyone else falls in the middle. So how can we use this kurtosis to figure out whether or not ADA has reached some price stabilization? Because in the future, we can't keep on doing this. We can't keep on going to the moon and then dropping down to 0 cents, going to the moon, dropping down to 0 cents. Eventually, Cardano will not make it. Money will just flow out. But if it's a good stock like Apple, or if it's a good cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, eventually it's going to find a pattern and it's going to start this slow trajectory up. And we can use the kurtosis number in order to figure this out. So kurtosis is basically that measure of skewness, that measure of the probability. And there's different types of kurtosis. I don't want to go into a statistics lesson right now. You can have leptokurtic curves, you can have mesokurtic curves, and you can have platykurtic curves. And the general rule of thumb is leptokurtic has a positive value, which means that the bell curve, the mean, that middle part where it arches, it goes extremely high. So of course there are outliers, but it means the curve is nice and high and has an apex point. Mesokurtic is normal. It usually has a value of 0, and it's that standard bell curve. And platykurtic is under, so it's negative, and the curve is not so much of a curve. There's too many people within that mean, so it's kind of indented or it's kind of flatlined. Personally, for stocks, if you analyze stocks, you want the stock to be more leptokurtic, but you don't want it to be too leptokurtic where everything is in the mean. You kind of want a more even type of bell curve, but that has some sort of apex point. So looking at stocks, looking at cryptocurrencies, that number that you want for that kurtosis value is 3. 3 is that magical number that says that the stock would be doing well. It would basically say that there are outlier values that exist, but for the most part, it is following a pattern. It has an even variation. So if you look at Apple in the beginning, its kurtosis score or its Kurt score was it was all over the place. But as we have more and more years of data, you're going to see exactly what happens to the Apple kurtosis score or the Kurt score. So let's find out the kurtosis score, the Kurt score for Apples. So we can just do the Kurt value. Okay, and then we're going to just do this. Kurt value is 3.626045. Let's do the Kurt value of Cardano. We're going to do this. All right, so we have a Kurt value for Cardano at 9.13, and we have a Kurt value of Apple at 3.6. What does this tell me? This tells me that Cardano is nowhere near price stable. There's a lot of appreciation that still exists. If Cardano exists in 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to see that kurtosis value go down to 3. You're going to see it approach 3. So Apple, on the other hand, is 3.62, so it can still have some sort of fluctuation, but it's a relatively well-priced stock. Cardano, ADA is not relatively well-priced because it has a very high Kurt value, which means that the curve, the bell curve, the apex point is just, it's like completely vertical. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And Apple had these high Kurt values prior to 2019. In the beginning, it had these high Kurt values. As time goes by, as more data points get added, as the price increases, actually, the Kurt value is going to go down. So it's going to even to 3. If you look at ADA, if the price increases, if the price continues to increase, the Kurt value will actually go down. So there has already been that fluctuation and that massive retracement. But if this stock or this cryptocurrency is here to stay, you'll see it move down towards that Apple number. So Apple still needs some kind of correcting because its current value is not that perfect 3, but it's very close. It is very close. So if you see this and you see Apple, and I don't know, I sometimes use this. If you liquidate some of your cryptocurrency in the future, if I liquidate some of my cryptocurrency in the future, I'm definitely going to be analyzing stats like the Kurt score to figure out whether or not it's reached some kind of stability. If I see that it's reached these 3 numbers, maybe I will be more confident in letting go some of my ADA or letting go of any other cryptocurrency that I hold. It's all about the statistics, so finding those patterns. So I think the Kurt value is a great metric to figure out whether or not ADA will either increase in the future or kind of stabilize and resemble more of an Apple type stock. Let me know what you think about Kurtosis. Let me know what you think about the Kurt value. For all the statisticians out there, let me know what are the fallacies with Kurt values in analyzing stocks, but I think it's a pretty good estimate because everything follows that bell curve pattern in life. And like I said before, humans are very predictable creatures in aggregate. And while some people are eccentric, we just call them outliers, but most people follow that middle path. So until the next video, have a wonderful day.